Welcome to Home Cooking with Dad. Today's video is going to be different. Instead of sharing a recipe, I'm going to be sharing with you the insight on how I became a better cook. I realized working in a restaurant is different than being a home cook. In a restaurant, you have a fixed menu, but the customers vary every day. Whereas at home, your customer is fixed, that is your family. But you need to provide a menu that is varied every day. So to be creative in my cooking, I had to understand one, what makes food delicious? Second one is, how can we use the same ingredients but use different cooking methods to make the food taste different so that I can add more variety into the menu. So when we eat, we are presented with the visual, the aroma, and then we have the taste and the texture of the food. And we use this to judge whether the food is delicious or not. So the most important thing, or the first thing that I always look at, rather than the looks, is the aroma. Because aroma is more powerful than visual. When we get the smell, we tend to will trigger our appetite. So here I use aromatics such as herbs and spices, together with smoking techniques like using apple wood in a charcoal grill or a gas grill burner. Next, when we take a bite of the food, we are presented with two things. One is the taste, and secondly is the texture. So let's look at the taste. We have the common ones that are sweet, sour, and salty. But many people forget about the bitterness. And I actually do add a little bitterness in some of my foods, like curries. I do sear or add in spices such as fenugreek, which add very slight bitterness to the dish. And it helps to add more complexity in the taste. Then we have the heat of the dish, or the spiciness. And we can use different types of spices or herbs to get that spiciness. For example, like pepper, star anise, cloves, they produce a kind of heat that's different that we get from chilies. Now that we have covered taste, let's cover texture. So texture is when you bite into the food, is a sensation that we get. So understanding the correct texture for the food is important. For instance, this bread, we expect it to be soft. Maybe a good steak, you want it to be tender and not tough. Here's a tip for you. Gritty and greasy foods are two of the texture or taste that nobody enjoys. So I'll put the temperature of the food served under texture. So some foods taste better if they're served at the correct temperature. Like things like salads, they're served chilled rather than warm, taste better. So many of us don't really put effort or sometimes forget about the temperature of the food that we serve. So when we serve our family, we tend to put it, most of the time it's always cold. So food manufacturers and fast food restaurants, they enhance the flavor of their food by adding a lots of fat and loads of seasoning such as salt and sugar. So as a home cook, I would need to use healthier options to flavor my food. These are some of the things that helped me to be more creative and had improved my dishes greatly. First is understanding your ingredients. You can have the best ingredients, but if you don't know how to use them correctly, it's going to be a problem. So one of the most important things is spices. I've changed a lot of my spices and the way they've used them. The first thing that I think is really improve the quality of my cooking is I make my own blended spices. I use quality ingredients to make my own blend. I also have introduced a lot of new spices into my cooking. Things like kalpasi, black cardamom, muruti, which is a type of cottonseed, kaskas, Sichuan peppers. So within the last 1 year, I've introduced maybe 5 to 6 different types of new spices that I had never used before. And knowing how to use the spices also is important. Things like, for instance, the black mustard seeds. Normally when you fry them, you need to let them pop before you add in any of the other spices. Or if you were to use like cumin or fennel, it's best to dry roast them so it adds more flavor and aroma to your dish. On a side note, we all know we need to use quality spices in our cooking. But what is quality spices? Many of us. So if you'd like me to make some videos about spice quality, please put them in the comments below. Secondly, it's very important to use the correct fats when you want to cook. Commonly you see in my videos, I'm using coconut oil, ghee, and sometimes gingerly oil to cook Indian food. The cooking fat is the foundation of any good curry. So as you start, you need to use the correct oil for the dishes. Thirdly is I started to learn a little bit more about how we store fresh fruit, such as prawns, fish that I buy. Some of them store very well, but you would need to do certain things. Like prawns, normally I would shell them out and I would put a little bit of sugar to store them. Another thing that has helped me improve my dishes is experimenting with different cooking methods and technology. Example, I'm using now more broiling, grilling, barbecuing, and even smoking. This helped me to change the flavor of some of the dishes. One of the examples is traditionally if I would make fish sambal, I'll just quickly fry the fish and then make the sambal in a wok and finish it off there. But nowadays I also have same ingredients, but I just put it in a banana leaf and I wrap it up as a parcel and I put it on a grill. And because it's just changing the technique of cooking, but same ingredient, the flavor and the texture is totally different. So using different utensils also play an important part in the quality of the food that you produce. Previously, I would use aluminium or non-stick frying pans, but now I've shifted over towards more cast iron skillets, and the result is totally different. If I do lamb chops, for instance, I get better quality finishing with using iron skillets rather than I do with my aluminium non-stick pans. In the old days, I used to see my grandmother when she used to cook. She used to use a wood burning stove, and we used to use mango wood. And so whenever she cooks, the flavor of the dishes were much tastier. So to simulate the same effect, I'm now experimenting a little bit more on smoking, and I use wood like applewood, hickory, maple, apricot to flavor the dishes that I'm making. And I even use. I'm also using spices like star anise, cumin, and cinnamon, to actually smoke some of the dishes that I'm making. So applewood with cinnamon, you can make very nice smoked rib. Another thing that's very interesting is when you're smoking, the amount of smoke that you put in can actually change the flavor of the dish. Example was when I was making pork wind. If I had smoked using hickory wood and I smoked it for a long time, I noticed that it shifted from being a Chinese style chicken wing, it started tasting more like Western barbecue wings. In my channel, I'll be experimenting on smoking techniques and I'll be showing how we can use them in our daily cooking. So please do subscribe if you're interested. So the next thing that helped me improve my dishes is aging. Some dishes are best served the next day, and that's what I call aging. So things like fish curry or even coleslaw, they taste much better the next day. Finally, I started to learn about using unconventional items such as like banana leaves as serving utensils or as cooking utensils.